make each fight unique and different.
He did write quite a bit of stuff on martial arts, and he developed his own style, and which was very minimalist. It really was. It was a most undemonstrative style of martial arts. And then when you read all this, and then you see Bruce on the screen, and then instead of this very sort of soft, introspective personality, it goes whack. I mean, what he did on the screen was absolutely no relation whatsoever to what he was teaching or studying. But Bruce understood cinema, and he made it look terrific.
When we were preparing The Game of Death, we started, this was a Hong Kong film, so we didn't have the entire script. We had a concept, and we were going to shoot a series of fight sequences that would bring together some of the greatest martial artists of the world, and Bruce would fight them one by one by one. The essence being that by the time he got to the top of this mythical tower, he would have shown that the best style was to have a style that was flexible, and that he would defeat each of these martial artists by understanding and using their inflexibility to defeat them. And it sounded great, except that when you get past the point of, okay, level 1, level 2, level 3, and he's now trouncing each martial artist, there still had to be something that was going to be at the top of the tower. We never came up with what it was that was going to be at the top of the tower. So when we went off to shoot Enter the Dragon, we stopped shooting Game of Death. Bruce looked at me and he said, "Thank God we don't have to solve that problem for 6 months."
I was supposed to play a Filipino from the southern Philippines, the way he wanted it. And that's what he portrayed me as. But I think what I did, Bruce Lee comes in later, but I fight this guy, the first guy, and he has this big log. And he fights me. It's like a log. It's more of a log than a pole, and I fight with him. Then the next one comes in, and I fight him. He has a little, it was a big stick, but then it got smaller. And I fight him with the stick, and I beat him. And then Bruce Lee comes in. He takes over, and then he beats him. I don't know if I was on the 4th floor or the 3rd floor, because he was constantly changing it. And then the last floor was the Style of the Unknown, which was played by Kareem.
While the ending of the film was not yet finalized, Bruce had decided that it would involve Australian actor George Lazenby.
The main thing was he wasn't going to kill me. He said, "I'm not going to kill you. You're going to be a good guy," because he killed practically everybody in these movies. They turned out to be bad. But he thought that I'd be a great communication rod to the people that he didn't get through to because of his Chineseness. And he said, some people don't see that we're all the same. He said, they don't see our souls. He said, our cultures are different. But Bruce was that kind of guy that wanted to go the best. He wanted to be the best he could. And he had no time for people who were wishy-washy or didn't care or weren't sincere. And it didn't matter where they were from. And I could tell that this guy didn't care that I was Wilo or Australian or Caucasian or whatever. He knew that I knew that this is the way to go. That's through spirit and not through nationality or religion or any of that stuff, which people generally bond through. I was going to be Bruce's man that came in and saved him at the end and got him out of this, it was some kind of a house, pyramid thing with a top floor, and I came in there and that was going to be my introduction. And I was like a mentor, and he was like super physical, but I was wiser. And then I was going to fade out again and then come into another movie with him later. And that's what we're talking about.
Whatever Game of Death might have been, it remains the final work of the greatest martial artist the world has ever seen. Bruce Lee left a legacy that revolutionized the martial arts and filmmaking. His memory is still held dear by those whose lives were touched by him.
I was in a store, and I wanted to buy these weights, which is about 150 pounds, and I didn't have the money. And I looked at it, and he said, well, let's go. And he said, boy, I wish I could get this. I just mentioned it. He said, you know, I wanted to buy some weights for Brandon. And at that time, Brandon was like 5 years old, so I thought it was kind of strange that he would buy these weights. And as we walked out, and when we got to my house, he dropped me off. He says, I was just kidding. It's not really for Brandon. It's for you. And as long as you use it, I will be very, very happy. So use it. And he gave me the weight. So I was very touched by that.
There was a whole world of film that America and Europe was ignorant of, which was martial arts films. And that by styling himself in the way that he did, he became, number one, the person to introduce the world to Chinese martial arts, and really in general to martial arts.
One of the things that impressed me enormously were just simple things like sitting in a jackknife position on the floor with arms folded and feet up in the air. Anyone who tries that for longer than 10 seconds, that's a tough ask. He used to do it for anything up to half an hour or more, just watching TV.
I said, gee, Bruce, what would you give to be 6'2" and 195 pounds? And he said, if I were 6'2" and 195 pounds, I'd rule the world.
It was my birthday, and I was with my wife and Linda Lee, and I had gotten to, I believe it was Mayako Restaurant, and it was in Orange County, I believe. And I had brought $100 with me, so I figured that would be enough for the night. But I guess it's really expensive. So there, and I got there, and I was short, and the bill was over 100, and he could tell it in my face that there was something wrong, because when I saw the bill, I didn't have enough. And he slipped me $50 under the table without my wife knowing it, or possibly without even Linda knowing it. And he said, I could tell that when you looked at the bill that you didn't have enough.
One time, sitting in his office, he told me his dream was one day was to be a bigger movie star than Steve McQueen, who at the time was the biggest movie star in the world. It's a little ironic that 20 years later, more people probably remember Bruce Lee than remember Steve McQueen.
And it wasn't his stature. It was, I mean, he really did, and I hate to use the word, but he had a charisma. I mean, he really seemed to be a few inches off the ground. He never really quite touched the ground, you know. there was a whip-cracking vitality about the guy. And of course, you know, rather than shake your hand, you'll demonstrate his, you know, the ability to send his foot past your nose, clearing it by at least a couple of tenths of an inch at about 140 miles an hour, and by way of introduction.
And then he said to Raym, he said, give George $10,000. And Raym says, what? Because Raym is a businessman, and Bruce, he said, George has got no money. Otherwise he wouldn't be standing on the bus stop.
Bruce was trying to show us a way in which we could make ourselves better people. And the way I look at it is that, unfortunately, we have to go through the physical aspect of entering into the spiritual essence of the martial arts, and which I feel is the most important, the final plateau in one's life. And the reason I say that is because at that point, when the door opens to get you into that spiritual plateau, that's when you finally learn who you are, so that you can honestly react to anybody else without having any fear.
I know that when you speak to the younger film directors in Hong Kong today, they all grew up on the Bruce Lee films.